Hi, it's Amy T. Meyer, and I'm here with Daniel, and he's going to tell us about his story in the military in just a second. Wrong one. No, actually, we don't have the video. All sorts of different things are going on today. This is Helping the Brave. My name is Amy T. Meyer, and I'm going to introduce Daniel. Tell us all about you.
Well, my name is Daniel Kowal, and I want to thank you for inviting me on your show tonight. Um, my story is probably like a million other young men in their teen years in high school. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I grew up just a suburb of the city of Pittsburgh, just north of the city, in the mid 1980s. And at that time, if people will know history and what was going on in our city, well, we were basically the steel capital of the world at one time. But in the 80s and after the recessions in 79 and 80, uh, we lost a lot of jobs. The steel mills were closing down. And, a lot of kids my age, didn't really see a bright future coming out of high school because we were three, four generations of people that worked in steel mills. And that wasn't an opportunity for a lot of us. And, I was a typical high school kid, played football, played sports, didn't have the greatest grades in the world. So I needed some structure. And I think that that's what drew me to the military itself. And when I had the opportunity, I went to the recruiter, jump through all the hoops, just like everybody else does, go to your MEPS, take your testing, and then you find a spot, and I entered into the delayed entry program. And the following summer, I graduated. Well, I graduated high school in 1984, and then that that fall, I was on a bus to the airport. And next thing you know, I ended up in Alabama at Fort McClellan at the receiving station. And just story pretty much every other teenager out there can remember their first day there. And the most distinct memory I had was the first night. I'm laying in the bunk and I'm staring at the ceiling with the light right above my head, wondering what the heck I just did. So, but I never looked back. I got the U.S. Army. Went through my basic training. I went to my AIT. I did end up going back and becoming a combat medic, going to Sam Houston, and ended up getting stationed. And my first duty station was Fort Polk, Louisiana, and with the 5th Infantry Division. And pretty much just stayed there for the rest of my career. I was a 6-year career. Uh, and I think the structure and the discipline and the camaraderie definitely amongst the troops and the people you go through together, it builds something, and it definitely built the character person I grew into later in life.
Very
And
cool. So, can I ask, did you ever look at any of the other services, or did you just,
yeah, I actually went to the Marine Corps recruiter first, and they, for whatever reason, I guess their budget wasn't quite as big as the Army at that time in the mid '80s, and there wasn't a lot of opportunities to go in right away. If I did, I would have been kind of in standstill for a while, and but I had already taken the ASVAB and all that, so I had already qualified for the Army testing wise. So I just went across the street in the Army and had the opportunity to get in quicker and start my manhood, I guess you want to call that. So, like I said, I never looked back. I enjoyed my time in the Army immensely, and what it built, it definitely made a difference for the rest of my life because I ended up spending 28 years in law enforcement after that. So it definitely grounded me, and it built that esprit de corps and the discipline and the integrity I needed. It carried me through the rest of my career in civilian life. I just retired back in September. Like I say, with uh, almost 28 years of law enforcement, and a lot of what I learned in the Army and a lot of what I learned about that paramilitary organization, it helped me in my law enforcement career. and I held many positions and different units within law enforcement. That, like I said, you don't reflect. You reflect back as you when you get older. Now, when I'm older, I realize that when you're 18 years old and you're doing a job that has such great responsibility, I think a lot of these young people don't realize it. But when you get to my age now, look back. I mean, I knew guys like I had friends that were in the Air Force, I had friends in the Marine Corps, the Navy. Some of these guys were working on flight lines, putting nuclear warheads on planes. Over on Germany, doing patrols in the mid '80s and the early '90s. Cold War was going on, so you know, you don't even think about it when you're 19, 20 years old. The responsibility you really have in your hand, and what the country gives you that responsibility, and you're required to carry it out and do what's right. So
Great. Well, before we go too far, do thank you for your service and for even your service, or as well as your service as a first responder. Um, so you said you use a lot of things that you learned in the Army for becoming a first responder. Was there anything that you separated yourself from that you thought, oh, this won't work?
yeah, what you learn. Well, our military was set up that we kind of learn a little bit of everything, and then you have your primary job because it's not like where the Soviet military was back in the '80s and the '90s, where their specialty was one particular job, and they didn't know the other job. So, like when you're in infantry like that, even though I was the combat medic amongst the platoon members, I had to know just a little bit about everybody's job, because we had to be able to fall back and do each other's job at a moment's notice. But you also, in the military, it's very regimented, and you're regimented into following certain rules, certain regulations, and orders. Well, in law enforcement, a lot of times you're the only person out there, and you have somebody that's having a traumatic situation in their life that, this is when you go on in law enforcement, you see more and more of things over and over again, and you become a little numb to them. But then you also have to step back and realize that this might be the first time this person ever had a traumatic thing happen in their life. And you have to realize that. You have to realize that in a split second and say, all right, I'm the voice of reason here on scene. I'm handed something and I have to make a split second decision. And I am the decision maker. It all falls on me right now. And sometimes in the military, more things are regimented for you. And you learn that it's good to have that skill set, but at the same time, you have to really think on your feet when it comes to law enforcement, because you might be the only person there with the answer, and there might not be somebody coming anytime soon to bail you out. So that's like a lot of times you hear when you situations in law enforcement where people involved. Hello? Sorry
Yes, I
about
can hear
that.
you.
Something cut through my phone. A lot of times, and you hear that people always talk about the Monday morning quarterback. That's because somebody has days and days to think about a situation that you got to make a decision in a split second. And in a way, the military helps you prepare for that, but in a way, it doesn't. It's because sometimes things aren't black and white in the real world. So sometimes I think as a military person, it takes you a little bit of time to adjust to that, you know, because now there's a lot more, you don't have a barracks to go back to. You don't have food sitting in the chow hall. It's like certain things you just, you're going to be on your own and you have to adjust to that, because coming from living at home, your mother cooks you dinner and you go right in the military. I mean, don't get me wrong, you got to make your bed, shine your shoes, clean your uniform, press, iron, do your clothes, do your laundry. But at the same time, you have a kind of a safety net to fall back on with, if you're hungry, you have no money, just go to the chow hall. There's food there. There's this and that. Then when you hit the real world, whatever you make in that paycheck, you got to stretch it out because you got to make sure you got a house over your head, you got food in your refrigerator, you got gas in your car, and all those things. It's a little different than in the military. So it's sometimes there's a transition there where the people don't realize that now is another step of being an adult. So
Very true. Um, so when you got out, was there any transition services back then for you? Like, did you have to go to classes, or did you know what your next step was going to be, or how long did it take you? The last one. How long did it take you to become a police officer from when you left the military?
No, there was no, when I got out, you basically went to your out processing, you got your last dental checkup, your last health checkup. They signed off on your DD 214 and they give you a packet of paperwork. And they gave you pretty much a bus ticket to get back to where you entered the military to. That was like the responsibility back then. Was you had to go, even if you didn't want to go back. They gave you enough money to get a ticket to send you back to whatever MEP station in the city of Pittsburgh, and that's where you were sent to go to. You didn't have to go there, but that was pretty much it. There was no real follow up, no real like job fair things or anything that you could, go through to. But I did have the GI Bill, which I think now the GI Bill is a much, much better resource than it was when I went through. And, and I did use the GI Bill. I ended up going to college for criminal justice. And that's how I ended up going into the law enforcement field. But
So
I
what
did
college
kick
did you
around.
go
I
to?
did some construction jobs and things like that while going to school. It wasn't something that happened right away. And I just knew that there was something out there that would fit my personality and my discipline and integrity that I did gain from the military. And then I felt that was the next best transition was to get into law enforcement. And like I said, I never looked back. I mean, I can't complain.
Very cool. So I always ask, are you involved in any charity work that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, and believe it or not, I retired in September, and I took 2 weeks off basically, and I entered into our local county commissioner's race here in Naples, Florida, or Collier County. I'm going to run for the Collier County Commissioner seat here, and we've had some issues in the past. There's a couple organizations here that do housing for veterans, and they ran into some issues with some of our local politicians the past few years about the zoning and things to that nature. And that's one of the platforms I'm definitely running on is to help our veterans and to make sure we do have some affordable housing in our community to help these guys out because if you they're such an important asset to us in our country, and the things they did and sacrificed for us, it's priceless. And if that's the least I can do right now, and I tell you what, it's a lot of work. I'm probably busier now than I was when I was working in law enforcement because I got to go everywhere, every event. I got to speak here and there, and it, and the fundraising and just about everything. I'm learning because I was never a politician. I've always been a public servant, but never a politician. And I'm learning on the run or on, you know, and it's amazing though. We do have a pretty good community here. It supports our law enforcement. I've been a member of the American Legion for a while, and I participate in a lot of events over at the VFW. And we do an event here. A friend of mine, he started it. It's called Take a Soldier Fishing. It's a great event. I volunteer for that every year. And basically, what it is all active duty members of the military have an opportunity. They bring them here to Naples. They put them up in a hotel, and that night they have a dinner for them. The following morning, all the local captains, the charter captains, and they pick out of a hat what boats they're going to be on, and they take like 4 or 5 military personnel. They leave out at the sunrise. We have a big ceremony, a flyover with our police helicopter, and they head on out. They fish all day, deep sea fish. They come back, and then they have a big ceremony. They do a weigh-in on the fish, and somebody gets an award. And then it's pretty much a whole weekend event. And it's just to see, the smiles on these faces and what they get out of this is just it's priceless. And that my friend Steve Lloyd, he started it here in Naples. It's been going strong for several years now. Great event.
I think that's great. I do think, I agree. It is connection. I'm really hoping to um, help with female veteran homelessness here in the state of Washington. And one of the statistics that I learned is that women who serve are twice as likely as to get into homelessness than their civilian counterparts.
Hmm.
And I think that might be something that you can research and look into. But that is interesting to me that women who serve are twice as likely to experience homelessness, and oftentimes, I also think that one of the things is how somebody is categorized as homelessness really needs to be dialed in better. So if you're couch surfing, you're not actually considered homeless,
Yeah.
and I think you should be because you don't have a home.
Yeah. And like I said, in my law enforcement career, I've been exposed to a lot of that. And we have another organization here called St. Matthew's House, and it provides clothing, shelter to a point. I mean, but they run a really strict house there, and they have to come in, they have to blow into a breathalyzer every night, and they have to be in at curfew, and they have so many beds, but they pretty much they'll give, believe it or not, we have mothers with small children that are in that category, and they try to get them beds first. And but I've seen, oh God, over the years, I mean, just the 18 years I spent here in Naples, Florida, working in law enforcement, uh, the amount of homeless camps that we've had in the woods and along the highways, and any patch of woods where they can find a place to set up. And a percentage of them are veterans, and they fell on hard times, or some of them just couldn't readjust, and it's easier for them just to kind of give up sometimes. And that it's just, it breaks your heart to see that. And I know in the past, I've just tried to help them in the capacity I could in a law enforcement capacity. But sometimes they don't even want your help. It's amazing that they're that proud that they don't want the help either. And that's hard to get the normal person to understand that. Because if you've never been in the military, you've never had pride, or that esprit of the corps, to be able to do on your own. It's hard for you to take a handout too.
I
So
think that's I think that's true, and I when you think of perspective, like so if you're camping, maybe you just don't feel like it's that bad, but somebody with home with resources and stuff like that, it looks that bad. And I think it's hard because they feel like sometimes like they're making it work, even though it's not ideal. They're making it work, and they feel like I have heard from veterans that there's so many people worse off. That is, I think, the hardest barrier to get someone to take resources is because they do comparative superiority kind of in reverse, where they feel like everybody is more worthy than they are for whatever resource. Um, but I think we all have to participate in helping the society be better. And so Charlie Plum that I had mentioned, he really wants veterans to get involved in local and into government because he feels like we're the ones that have seen so many different countries, so many different demographics, so many different experiences that help when you look at things in a holistic view, regardless of what side of the aisle that you're on. He feels like veterans should participate in government.
yeah, I agree. And I don't know if you saw in the news, I just read an article that I think there's 6 retired Navy SEALs throughout the country right now that have just entered into their local congressional races. And I think we're seeing more and more of our veterans, taking a part in the local and in federal government. And, we need that mix of people coming together. You know, listen, I talk to people, since I got into this political party here or in this political race here, I'm registered as a particular political category. I'm a registered Republican, and I see the party itself because I go look at I go to these meetings and I go meet the other Republicans in our GOP. And the only way I can equate it to is a WWE wrestling match. It's sort of, it reminds me of. I go there for entertainment once a month because there's more bickering within their own groups. And I equate it to this, and I've talked to other veterans that are involved, and I said, listen, we've all been, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard, and we always talk about each other. We always got that little, hey, the Navy give you a ride today, Marine Corps, or this or that, we always have our own little thing. But you know what? When the crap hits the fan, we all come together as brothers and sisters, and we all form together and create a complete unit, and we take care of the problem. And if only our political parties can realize that we have one country we're all working for, and the people of that country are our citizens. And if they can come together like the military does in a time of crisis, then maybe we could get more things done around here. And it just boggles my mind that they can be so dysfunctional when they're around each other. So I'm hoping that more military people do step up and enter into your local politics and your federal politics, because I think we know how to work together when the time comes.
Well, I think that's a great message. Um, so, and I had forgotten to ask when we were emailing um, information where you were coming from, but so you're in Florida.
Yes, yeah, Naples, Florida. They call it Freedom Town, USA. I don't know if you ever heard that.
Well, no, because I'm in Washington State, so I am literally the opposite.
You are
More
about as far as you can get from where I am.
right. Um.
I had
So,
relatives that lived in Everett at one point, so I've
oh
been
yeah.
up there. Yeah, yeah. He worked for Boeing, so I used to go up there and visit him.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my grandfather actually worked for Boeing. He was identified during the Second World War, and so he never was drafted because of what he did for Boeing for the war efforts.
Hmm.
And so I literally have his union pins, like 50 years working for a union and stuff. And so, but I love history, so I love going back and seeing just all the differences. And very patriotic man, but just served his country through other means. But so, do you have military? Were you the first one in your family to serve, or do you have military that served in your family?
No, both my grandfathers both served in World War II. My grandfather's brother John was in the Navy in the Korean War. My uncle was in the Vietnam War. So yeah, I come from a long line, and my cousin, we're the same age. We both joined the army at the same time out of high school. So yeah, I have dates pretty far back. You know, so
Very cool. Um, Let me think. Okay, so um, when you think of soldiers, are you noticing a difference in the soldiers that, or the people who serve nowadays than in the past? Do you feel like their skill sets are more developed or developed differently? Like when you saw, say, even police officers that came that had prior service, are there a difference in a police officer with no prior service and a police officer with prior service?
yeah, I definitely see a difference there. And I I personally feel law enforcement in the past 10 years has kind of gone away from recruiting uh, prior military people. I think it went more towards the educational. They're giving more weight to education with degrees, and regardless what the degree's in, they were giving more weight to it when it came for a hiring process. And then they did the military, and I think it's catching up to them because, you know, you can only be so technical. At some point, somebody has to have boots on the ground and they have to be in the woods fighting. I mean, you can't. It, Law enforcement is getting all this high tech, these real time operation camera surveillance, camera on every corner on the street. They're trying to solve crime through a computer analysis and things like that. And it's good to a point for gathering some intelligence and information. But at some point, you got to take that gathering information and intelligence, and somebody has to carry it into the streets. You gotta. It's just like hunting. I'm a deer hunter. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so you hunt deer since big enough to hold a rifle. And you go out, you find out where the deer go, you find their trails, you find where the bucks rub on the trees, you see the identifiers. You're out there. You're learning where they go, where they've been, and where they habitat. Well, it's the same thing with law enforcement when it comes to when we call the boogeyman, when they do something really bad. You need the guys that aren't afraid to be on the streets, that aren't afraid to know who his two ex-girlfriends were, or what kind of cars they drove, or where they used to live, or where they hung out, or that kind of information. You get that from the streets. You don't get that from video. You don't get that from books, and you still need that group that's willing to do that. And the sad part in law enforcement, I've seen administrators and politicians, they cave to a lot of a loud minority when it comes to, like, let's just say, for instance, like the body cameras. When I started, we didn't have cameras even in our cars. We didn't have computers. You wrote everything on a notepad. You did an accident report, you wrote it with a pen. And if it was too cold, you had to use a pencil because the pen would freeze. So, nowadays everything's so regimented with the computers and the programs, and with the video stuff, it's almost like now if it's not on video, it didn't happen. And I don't want to get all political, but we had a perfect incident where it was Columbus Police Department in Ohio, where they implemented the body cameras, and there was an incident where a 16-year-old girl was stabbing two other girls in her front yard. And the young police officer was confronted with a deadly force situation. And he's sworn to protect life just as much, to protect his own life, but other people's lives. And he had to stop the threat. And he used to stop the threat, he used deadly force. And he did stop the threat. He saved another woman's life from the person who was stabbing him. And this was totally captured on video. It was looked at, it was done textbook wise for him to stop the threat on somebody killing another person. But then, of course, the loud minority automatically said that wasn't good enough. So where do you draw the line? I mean, at some point, you can't it's like they said, well, no, she was too young to shoot. I don't know if age discriminates when you're murdering somebody. And it's just like you had a shoot that was captured on a camera where he stopped the threat and saved another woman's life, but the media still ran with it, and they tried to ruin this officer's life because now he was too young, or the victim was too young to be shot. It's almost like if you give them an inch, they want a mile, and they're never going to be satisfied. So you have to just do good police work, and you have to do what is justified in the moment to protect citizens' lives. And it's almost like now the body camera is not even good enough. So what's next? I mean, do you have a lawyer riding a car with you next? I don't know. But at some point, society has to draw a line and say, all right, enough is enough. These people have to do their job. And look at some of these cities that want to defund the police. Now their crime rate, their murder rates, and everything skyrocket through the roof because the police officers are afraid to do their job. So I don't want to go political on you, but at some point we have to believe in the system. So
Well, I think, I think we
I think
need.
I lost you.
Are you with me?
Yeah,
I
there you.
can hear you. I can't see you. There you
There I am.
go.
Sorry about that.
Technology. Between you and me both.
But that I truly believe that we need to start seeking out people coming out of the military, the men and women coming out of the military, and try to recruit them in law enforcement because I think they fill that void, that discipline, and that you don't have to teach. They've already lived it, and I get it. There's discipline to go to college, but it's not really quite the same as the discipline you receive from the military.
I think it's more than just discipline. Like I do believe, like you, like I really believe in education. My daughter's actually, I'm going to pick her up after the show, and she's going to Bowling Green University, and she's studying forensics and criminal justice. But it's the experiences, I think, here again, of being in different countries, of seeing all sorts of different types of events in that create the opportunity to be the best in different areas. And I think policing is one of those things. Like, in lieu of a military, but I have a very unpopular opinion that everybody should serve for 2 years. Like, I love that theory. And I have a son who has epilepsy, and he's incredibly liberal. And so I love him so much. We get into some really great discussions. But even him, he could serve in a hospital or something that serves your country for 2 years. And I want to say, I don't even think he disagrees with me, because I think when you serve a greater good and you experience different things, I think it just changes you as a person, and it gives you a larger holistic view.
No, I agree.
You know more than just your hometown.
I agree 100%. I actually had said that myself. I think everyone should spend 2 years in the military. It just,
I do.
yeah.
I would love huge educational reforms, and I would love everybody to have to serve. I think that would, and it could be a society multiplier, because you figure. So I do, like I said, have said, I've worked with a lot of volunteering through the years, and a lot of demographics that don't get 3 meals a day and don't get the same opportunities and different things. So if everybody served for 2 years, so for 2 years, you had those simple things that you said. You had 3 meals a day. You had a clear objective and understanding of the rules and opportunities based not on anything other than what you're doing. And so, yeah, I could definitely jump on that soapbox with you, sir.
Yeah. Well, I believe the Israeli government does that. Israelis, they serve a 2 year, I think, 2 year or 3 year term in their military.
Well, the Germans have done it before. I mean, there's been a lot of European countries. It is, like I said, you have both. Not everybody has to go into the military like we did, but you do 2 years of service. I think that's a beautiful thing, because even, working with the elderly or working with people with special needs, these things, understanding when you walk into a new narrative than what you know, you grow.
You know, I people, you hear in the news and how they want their education paid for, and they want, what is it, 2 years of community college paid for by the government. And I tell them, I did that. And they're like, what do you mean? I says, yeah, I joined the military and became a GI Bill. And I went 2 years of criminal justice school on the government. I said, I only had to pay them 6 years to begin with. But other than that, I got my school paid for. But it's just out there. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Right? But, there's nothing for free in this world. People have to understand that. There's nothing for free. As much as you think it might be, there's not. There's somebody's paying for it, or you're going to pay for it in the end. But nothing's for free. The only thing you get gratification out is something you earned, something you worked for on your own. And that's one thing the military does do. I mean, they put you in a situation where you're in a in a situation where you have to work your way out of it. I mean, that's all part of the training. Task, through basic training or boot camp or whatever branch you went to. You're given these tasks, and you gotta by the end of the training be able to be a proficient in them. But you feel it builds you up. I mean, they break you down and they build you up. But that's earning it, though. You earned it when you're walking across that parade field at the end of the graduation, and you're saluting the flag as you're walking by the commanding officer, and he's saying you graduated. You earned that. And I think there's no greater feeling in the world for a young man to have that feeling.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you for everybody who joined us. And if you like what you hear here, please follow us. And don't go anywhere, sir, but I'm going to end the broadcast.
Bye-bye.